Jacob Daniels hadn't set foot in one of his own fast food restaurants for over 5 months. The legacy his father left, 5 locations across the state, had once been his pride, each built on grit, sweat, and community. What started as a single roadside shack had grown into a small empire under Jacob's vision. He had modernized the brand, streamlined operations, and pushed for aggressive expansion, but in the process, something vital had slipped through his fingers. Connection. Lately, customer complaints had begun to stack up. Not about the food. It was decent, consistent. The problem was colder, more subtle, and far more dangerous. People were being ignored. Staff were indifferent. Smiles had been replaced with sighs. Wait times stretched endlessly without apology or explanation. Jacob had seen the declining satisfaction charts, read the reports, nodded at the sugar-coated feedback from district managers. But none of it struck him like the email from an elderly man whose wife had left one of the stores in tears, humiliated by how she was treated. That email didn't just sting, it pierced. Jacob realized he was running a company he no longer recognized. Determined to see the truth, unfiltered and raw, he shed his identity like a snakeskin. The beard came off. His hair, once silver at the temples, was dyed a rich, forgettable brown. He wore thick glasses he didn't need and clothes that screamed anonymity, a worn-out hoodie, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers. He wasn't Jacob Daniels anymore. He was Jay, a broke, out-of-work guy trying to land a trainee job. His first shift was at the South End location, Store 1. The original. It still held decent numbers but was plagued by constant staff turnover. The manager, Rick, was in his mid-30s, buzzed hair, sharp tongue, and a reputation for running the place like a boot camp. When Jacob arrived, head lowered, Rick didn't even pause his phone scrolling. "You the new guy?" he mumbled. "Yeah, Jay." Rick barely looked at him before tossing over a stained apron and jerking his chin toward the kitchen. "Follow Mara. Try not to screw up." Mara was in her 40s, quiet and efficient, but the exhaustion in her eyes spoke louder than words. She trained Jacob without warmth or cruelty, just efficiency, like she was checking boxes. The kitchen was chaos. Orders piled up, customers grew restless, and staff snapped at each other like overworked machines. There was no rhythm, no leadership, just survival. By the time the lunch rush hit, Jacob had seen enough to know that something was fundamentally broken. Rick kept vanishing into the back office. When a customer asked for help, he'd either ignore them or bark at someone else to handle it. One moment stuck with Jacob like a thorn. An elderly woman, frail and soft-spoken, asked if there was a quieter place to sit. Rick didn't even look up. "This ain't a spa, lady." Jacob's jaw clenched. His fingers twitched with restraint, but he said nothing. He was here to learn, not to lead. Not yet. He visited Store 2, then 3. The patterns were the same. Cold managers, indifferent teams, mechanical service. By Store 4, Jacob was emotionally drained. The franchise he'd built with dreams of dignity and opportunity now felt like a machine, grinding down everyone in its path. Finally, Store 5, the worst performing location in the chain, North Side. A place with a bad reputation and a manager named Beth who was notorious for driving staff to quit. Jacob walked in on a Tuesday morning, still wearing the same disguise, still going by Jay. Beth didn't even greet him. "You the trainee? Clock in, start mopping." 2 workers had called out that day. One had quit the night before. It was just chaos and desperation. Jacob took the mop and quietly got to work. That's when he noticed Elijah, barely 20, wearing a headset, flipping burgers with one hand while managing the register with the other. His movements were frantic but purposeful. Despite the sweat dripping down his neck and the tremble in his fingers, he smiled when he saw Jacob. "Hey, you knew," he called out, breathless. "Yeah, Jay. I'm Elijah. Sorry, it's wild today. We're down 2 people. Just hang in there." There was no pretense in Elijah's voice, only kindness. It was disarming. For hours, Jacob observed. Customers came and went, most unaware of the storm behind the counter. Elijah never stopped moving, never complained, never snapped. He picked up the slack of an entire team without asking for recognition. He wasn't running on energy anymore. He was running on grit and heart. Then, just after 3 p.m., the moment that would change everything happened. An elderly woman entered. She looked frail, each step a struggle, her canvas tote hanging heavy by her side. Elijah spotted her from across the counter. Without hesitation, he stepped away from the line, removed his headset, and approached her gently. "Ma'am," he said softly, "do you want to sit down? You look like you've had a long day." She blinked, caught off guard. For a second, it looked like she might cry. "Yes, thank you," she whispered. "Just need a moment." It wasn't just the act, it was how Elijah did it. With dignity, with respect, with humanity. In a world of cold efficiency and corporate speed, he had remembered the one thing Jacob feared his empire had lost: compassion. And Jacob Daniels, disguised in a hoodie and soaked in mop water, felt something stir in his chest. It was hope. Elijah didn't hesitate. He helped the frail woman to a booth and, noticing her discomfort, gave her the stool he'd been using behind the counter. It was a simple gesture, but, in a place that felt mechanical and indifferent, it was an act of rebellion, an act of humanity. From the kitchen, Beth's voice snapped like a whip. "Elijah, what do you think you're doing?" "She needs to sit," he replied evenly, calm but firm. "I'll be right back." Beth scoffed. "We're not a daycare. Get back on register." Jacob watched the scene unfold, his chest tight. The woman sat, hands trembling in her lap. Her lips moved in a silent thank you, and tears began to gather in her eyes. She looked at Elijah like he was the first person who'd really seen her all day. And maybe he was. Jacob crossed the floor and sat across from her. "Are you all right, ma'am?" She nodded weakly, brushing at her cheeks. "I lost my husband last week," she whispered. "I just needed somewhere to sit. That boy, he looked at me like I still mattered." Jacob couldn't answer. His throat locked. He turned to glance at Elijah, who was now juggling a headset, a fryer, and a customer with a broken card reader. And still, he didn't complain. That was enough. Jacob stood and walked to the kitchen. "Beth," he said quietly. "I'm busy," she muttered, not even turning around. He leaned closer, his voice lower now, serious, that made her look up, irritation creasing her brow. "Who even are you?" Jacob pulled off his glasses. Beth's face drained of all color. "Elijah," Jacob called across the kitchen. "Can you come here for a sec?" Elijah jogged over, confused. Jacob looked between them, the mask now fully off. "My name's Jacob Daniels. I own this place, all 5 of them." Elijah blinked, stunned. "Wait. What?" "I've been working undercover the last few weeks," Jacob said, steady and clear. "And I saw everything. Your kindness, your work ethic, the way you treated that woman." Beth opened her mouth, but Jacob cut her off. "We'll talk later." Then, turning to Elijah, "You free tomorrow?" Elijah stammered. I guess. Good. You're coming with me to headquarters. We've got a spot opening in our leadership program. And I think you're ready." Elijah's eyes went wide. "Me? Are you serious?" Jacob smiled. "Dead serious. People like you. That's the reason this company still has a soul." Jacob stayed until the last customer left. The store closed at 9, but the air never settled. Elijah worked through the dinner rush with unwavering focus. No complaints, no pride, just a quiet determination that etched itself deeper into his posture with every task. After the woman left, he never mentioned her again. He just kept going, replacing napkin dispensers, wiping down tables, refilling sauce containers, as if kindness was just another part of the job. Jacob didn't speak much either. He was lost in thought, haunted by his father's voice echoing in his mind. Watch the quiet ones. They're carrying more than they'll ever say. When the last lights dimmed, Beth slipped away without a word. Elijah grabbed the trash and began tying bags, no one asking him to, just instinct. "You always close?" Jacob asked. "Most nights, unless I've got early classes." "You in college?" "Community, second semester, just general studies for now." "Long day for doubles." "I asked for more hours. Books aren't cheap, and my mom, she's been covering a lot." "Didn't feel right." Jacob grabbed a second bin. "What'd she do?" "Front desk at a clinic. She's got rheumatoid arthritis, but won't slow down. Says she's got too much spine for that." "You live with her?" "Yeah, just the two of us now." Jacob didn't ask more. He didn't need to. They stepped into the alley behind the store, the cold air biting at their faces. The night was sharp, wet, unfriendly. Elijah leaned against the metal door, flexing sore hands. "So what happens now?" he asked. "It's Beth." "Not tonight," Jacob said, "but soon." "Should I be worried?" "No. You did your job better than most, but she's been running this place too long without accountability. She's not gonna like what's coming." "No," Jacob admitted. "She won't." They stood there, silence thick around them. "You ever think of quitting?" Jacob asked softly. "Every other week," Elijah replied without pause, "but I keep waking up and putting the apron back on." "Why?" "Because every day I quit is a day she takes on more, and I can't let that happen, not after everything she gave up." Jacob studied him closely. "You ever had a mentor?" Elijah laughed. "Not unless you count YouTube tutorials on fixing leaky sinks." "I'm serious." "Then no, never had anyone stick around long enough." Jacob nodded. "You're about to." They finished cleaning and clocked out. Elijah grabbed his jacket, missing a button at the wrist. Jacob noticed. Outside, he offered a ride. "It's fine," Elijah said. "I take the last bus." "I know, I checked the routes before I came." Elijah squinted. "You sure you're a CO? I used to drive frozen patties across 3 counties in a truck with no heat. Before that, I scraped gum off the tiles at the first store. I remember what it's like to count quarters for coffee." Elijah paused, then slid into the passenger seat of Jacob's beat-up silver pickup. The heater worked. He let the warmth settle over him. They drove in silence for a while. "You ever think about why things get so bad before anyone notices?" Elijah asked, quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how long does it take before someone finally says, 'This isn't working'? Beth's been like this for a while. People quit every month. Customers complain. Still, no one from the top shows up." Jacob stared ahead. "I stopped showing up. That was the problem." "But will you stop?" "Because I thought if the numbers looked good, things were fine. I thought systems could replace presence." Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. They pulled up to a modest duplex. A porch light flickered. One step was cracked near the base. Elijah reached for the door handle but paused. "You really serious about tomorrow?" "Be ready by 9. I'll pick you up." Elijah nodded and stepped out. The next morning, he was waiting on the porch. Shirt tucked in, hair combed back, backpack slung tight. Jacob smiled when he saw him. They drove to headquarters, a humble 2-story building nestled between a tire shop and a print supply store. No gleaming marble floors, just clean linoleum and framed black and white photos of the original location. Inside, Jacob led Elijah to a conference room. 2 people waited inside, Nina, the HR director, and Marcus, the head of operations. Both had been with the company since the early years. "This," Jacob said, placing a hand on Elijah's shoulder, "is the future." Marcus extended his hand with a nod of respect. "Heard you kept the North Side store from falling apart last night." Elijah took the handshake, still looking around like he hadn't quite woken from the dream. Na gestured to a chair. "Take a seat. We want to know more about you." They asked about his school, his hours, his experience with leadership. Elijah answered honestly. No polished resume talk, just raw truth. He hadn't officially managed anyone, but he'd trained new hires, smoothed over customer frustrations, covered every position from grill to register more times than he could count. He didn't talk himself up, he just laid out the reality. He'd kept things running when no one else would. Na leaned in. "What do you want, Elijah? Long term?" "I'm not sure yet," Elijah said, eyes down for a moment. "But I know I want to work somewhere people matter. Not just customers. Everyone." Jacob listened, measuring not just the words, but the quiet integrity behind them. "And if we put you in the assistant manager program?" he asked. "You think you could handle it?" Elijah didn't fake confidence. "I'd try. I don't know everything, but I'm not afraid to learn." Jacob exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Let's fast-track him. Start with mentoring at Midtown. Have Ben L take him under his wing." Elijah blinked. "Wait, just like that?" "Not just like that," Jacob said. "You earned it. You've been earning it. We just finally showed up to see it." On the ride back to North Side, Jacob was quiet, but before Elijah stepped out, he reached into the glove box and handed him a sleek black binder. "What's this?" "Training materials, contact info, scheduling templates, everything you'll need to get started." Elijah held the binder like it weighed more than paper and plastic. "This still doesn't feel real." Jacob turned to him. "It should. This is what happens when someone does the right thing when no one's watching." The sun was higher now, the morning cold lifting into a soft, warming light. As Jacob drove away, he glanced back in the mirror. Elijah hadn't moved. He stood at the curb, flipping through the binder, lips moving as he read. Focused, grounded, read. Jacob no longer wondered if his company had lost its soul. He had just hired it back. 2 days later, Jacob sat in his office. The blinds were drawn halfway, casting long slats of shadow across a desk cluttered with ignored reports. His attention was on a quiet video playing on his laptop, security footage from the North Side store. The lobby was dimmed. The team was cleaning up in silence, and there was Elijah, moving station to station, checking in on a new trainee without being asked, swapping out a stack of cracked lids before anyone noticed they were low. It wasn't flashy. It was instinct. His movements had changed. Not arrogant, just solid, like someone who had finally realized they mattered. A knock broke the stillness. "Come in." Marcus stepped in, clipboard in one hand, half-empty coffee cup in the other. "Talked to Ben this morning. Elijah's already picked up the register protocol. He's troubleshooting kiosk issues without needing help." Jacob nodded. "How's he doing with the team?" "Listens first. Doesn't bark orders. When a trainee messed up, he didn't call them out. Just waited, pulled them aside later, walked them through it. Ben said it was smoother than some of our assistant managers." Marcus hesitated. "But I've got something else." HR flagged a report from last night, Northside. Jacob sat up. "Who filed it?" "Jonathan. Kitchen crew says Beth cornered him after close, accused him of talking behind her back, said if he didn't watch himself, she'd cut his hours. Jacob leaned back, slowly. How many now? 3 in 2 months. All different employees, same story. She takes them into the break room, says just enough to shake them, but never writes anything down. Jacob stood, grabbing his keys. She on shift. Until 5. We'll be there by 4. When Jacob walked into the North Side store, the usual lunchtime crowd had thinned. A pair of teens shared fries by the window. A delivery driver leaned on the counter. Behind the line, Elijah was multitasking again, restocking sauces, guiding a new cashier on the touchscreen interface, clipboard in hand. Beth stood near the fry station, arms crossed. Her eyes narrowed the moment she spotted Jacob. No greeting. She turned sharply and stepped into the back office, leaving the door ajar. Jacob waited until the lobby was mostly empty. Then he stepped behind the counter and knocked once on the open office door before entering. Beth sat at her desk, pretending to scroll a spreadsheet. Got a minute? Jacob asked. She minimized the window. If this is about the new guy, I already told HR. I don't think he's ready. I didn't come to ask about his performance. She finally met his eyes. Then what? 3 HR reports, all within 60 days, threatening to cut hours, questioning loyalty, creating a culture of fear. That ends today. Beth's jaw tightened. I run a tight ship. You want results. You can't coddle people. You want results, you build trust, not fear. You don't back people into corners. I've been here longer than you've owned this place. I've held it together when no one else would. Jacob didn't raise his voice, which is why I gave this time. I observed, I asked questions, but this isn't about standards, it's about control. Beth stood. So what? I'm out? You're being reassigned, training division, remote, no direct reports, compliance reviews and manual updates. Her face flushed. That's a desk job. It's a chance to stay if you want it. If not, you'll get a severance and a reference based on your operational strengths, not your leadership. She didn't respond. You have until end of day, Jacob said, turning to leave. Outside, Elijah reviewed a delivery manifest. He looked up. Is he okay? She'll be stepping back, Jacob said. You'll support Ben during the transition. We'll bring in someone next week to shadow. Elijah lowered the clipboard. What about the others? The ones too scared to speak up? You'll be heard, starting today. And they were. Jacob spent the next hour in the break room, meeting in small groups. No clipboards, no HR jargon, just real questions. What's working? What's broken? What do you need? A young woman, single mom, early 20s, described being denied time off for her son's dental surgery. Another said she was getting schedules with less than 24 hours notice. Jacob listened, didn't defend. By day's end, he had 2 pages filled. Not fluff, not optics, real problems, real fixes. The following week, a new policy launched. Schedules posted 7 days out, minimum rest time between shifts, an anonymous channel for staff to voice concerns, and Jacob didn't delegate it. He recorded a video himself. I lost sight of what mattered. That's on me. But I'm here now, and we're changing. He never said Elijah's name. He didn't need to. Across all 5 stores, the story traveled like wind. About the kid who gave a seat to a grieving widow. About how the CEO showed up beside him. How one simple act of kindness had sparked a movement. At the Midtown location, Elijah began his leadership rotation. He wore the assistant pin now. But he didn't carry himself like a manager. He carried himself like someone who finally believed he belonged. Elijah never raised his voice. The assistant pin on his apron didn't change how he moved through the restaurant. He still grabbed the mop when spills appeared, still stayed late when someone else's ride fell through. That night, with the last customer gone and the doors locked, Ben leaned against the counter beside him, arms crossed and amused. "You know," Ben said, "most people get that pin and start acting like they own the place." Elijah gave a quiet shrug, folding a damp rag into neat quarters. "I'm just trying not to screw it up." Ben chuckled. "You're not. You're setting the bar higher." Elijah didn't respond. Instead, he looked around the quiet lobby, then silently walked over to wipe down the soda machine, not out of habit, but because he noticed it needed it. Across town, dusk had settled over the headquarters. Jacob stood at his office window, hands in his pockets, watching as a mother balanced a tray while her daughter skipped ahead to a booth. Outside, the old neon sign flickered once before finding its glow again. He didn't need a performance chart or another board meeting to confirm what he already knew. The company was changing, and this time it wasn't coming from the top. In the following month, Jacob cut back on meetings and spent more time walking floors. No more pressed suits, no security detail, just jeans, plain shoes, and quiet eyes. Not a performance, just a return to where truth actually lived. His office door stayed closed more often now, not because he was unavailable, but because he'd finally realized the answers weren't in there. At Midtown, Elijah settled into the rhythm of the assistant manager training program. He arrived before opening and stayed long after close. During breaks, he studied the back end of the POS system with Ben, scribbling notes and asking the kinds of questions most managers never thought to ask. One afternoon, he stood beside a new trainee at the register, watching them fumble through a complicated combo order. After the customer left, Elijah leaned in. "You're tapping the custom modifier too early. It resets the price if you do that." The trainee looked embarrassed. "Sorry." "No worries. You want to run through it again before dinner hits?" "Yeah, please." Elijah nodded and toggled the terminal to training mode. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just didn't want the kid to get ridden up over a technicality that could be fixed in 10 minutes. Later that week, Ben pulled Elijah aside with a curious look. "You've got a meeting, HQ, today, 2 o'clock. No formal invite, no subject line, just a message passed through a trusted mentor." Elijah showed up early, wearing a clean button-down and carrying a weathered notebook stuffed with questions he hadn't yet had time to ask. Inside the conference room, Jacob sat with 2 others. A woman in her 50s, calm and sharp, a faint scar visible just above her collarbone. A man wearing a faded polo and a wedding ring dulled by years of wear. "This is Dana, Compliance and Facility Audits, and Rob?" "From Regional Ops," Jacob said, gesturing for Elijah to take a seat. "They've been reviewing the last 30 days of field reports." Elijah sat cautiously, unsure where this was going. Jacob leaned in. "We're restructuring, not just policies, people. Stores that were barely staying afloat have stabilized. Team surveys show a rise in trust, a drop in incidents, and your name keeps surfacing." Elijah swallowed hard. Dana spoke. "You've been named by 3 different team members in the last 2 weeks, not just as a good trainer, but as someone they'd follow. That's rare." Rob cleared his throat. "There's a lead supervisor opening at the new location by the university. Not a full management position, yet, but it's high visibility, high responsibility. You'd handle vendor deliveries, staffing calls, conflict resolution. You'd be leading, without the title yet." Jacob met Elijah's eyes. "It's a test, not of loyalty, of leadership." Elijah looked down at the notes in his lap. He hesitated only briefly. "I'd have to change my class schedule." Dana nodded. "Or adjust, either way. It's yours if you want it." He looked at them again. one by one. If you trust me with it, I'll figure it out. Jacob gave a single nod. You start Monday. The next week hit differently. The new location was in soft launch, bare-bones staff, cardboard signs still taped to windows. Elijah arrived early every day, sometimes before the delivery truck. He helped assemble shelving, ran mock order drills, even timed how fast the crew could move from ticket to tray. The GM, Celine, a veteran leader, watched with quiet interest. She'd seen fast risers before. Most crashed under pressure. But Elijah didn't sprint. He paced, every move purposeful. One afternoon, she found him realigning ketchup bottles. You know the guests don't care if the labels are crooked, right? He didn't look up. They do when 4 of them are empty. She smiled. You always this exact. If I'm asking the team to care, he said, I should start with the basics. Later, she handed him 2 write-ups to address. One for a kitchen delay, one for a missed break. Elijah pulled a folded sheet from his back pocket. Mario didn't miss his break. He gave it up to cover for someone having a panic attack in the storage room. Just didn't log it. The delay? Printer jam. I submitted a request for a backup unit. Celine blinked, impressed. I'll stop hovering then. You're not hovering, Elijah said. You're watching. I get it. She smirked. You're going to make my job obsolete. That evening, Jacob walked in unannounced, wearing a jacket still dusted from a warehouse visit. Elijah spotted him immediately, but didn't stop. He was handling a guest complaint, missing side cold sandwich. But there was no script, no robotic apology. He asked questions, listened, offered a remake, tossed in a free drink voucher. The guest left, smiling. Only then did he walk over. You checking in? Just passing through. You want to see the stockroom? We reorganized the dry goods by volume and weight. It speeds up the unload. Jacob followed him. The shelves were pristine. Manifests clipped to the doors, bins off the ground, labels easy to read. You did this? Some. The rest came from listening to the crew. No one asked before. Jacob paused. You remember the woman you gave your seat to? Elijah's face softened. I remember. She came back, left a note, said she's volunteering at a hospice now, said you reminded her that small kindnesses still exist. Elijah didn't speak right away. I didn't think it mattered that much. It did. Jacob placed a hand on the doorframe. 3 weeks left in the trial. Once it's up, we'll talk again. But I'll say this, some people take a decade to change a company. You've done it in less than 1. Elijah nodded, but his eyes lingered on the neatly labeled shelves. That night, after the last clock out, Elijah locked the front doors, turned the sign to close, and stood in the empty lobby. No voices, no orders. Just the quiet hum of the soda machine and the distant echo of his own breath. He didn't feel like a manager. He felt like a learner, a builder, someone just getting started. And somehow that was exactly why he belonged.